is America, and this is the U.S. Treasury Department, now the tip of the spear of America's economic pressure campaign against Iran. The U.S. has returned to its preferred tools of economic sanctions and a naval blockade aimed at choking off Iran's oil exports. But how long will this endurance gamble continue, and will the pressure be enough to force Iran to accept America's demands? I'll have more on that later, but first, here's Marquardt in our Washington studio.
Thank you, Heidi. Low key, that is how President Donald Trump has said he wants to end this war with Iran, which is now in its 6th month. Now, what that means, rather than military operations, is sanctions and economic measures that have never before been seen. That's according to the Treasury Secretary. Cut off the cash, the theory goes, and the regime bends. But as is so often the case with economic punishment, it is the people, regular Iranians in this case, who would suffer first. The more insulated IRGC and political elite can better adapt, as they have for decades. Iran also has a weapon of its own, the Strait of Hormuz, the artery for a fifth of the world's oil. So, a test of patience and endurance. Can Tehran outlast this American pressure, or will Washington flinch first from its own economic and political pain? Heidi Jo Castro examines the U.S. strategy.
As the war with Iran puts pressure on U.S. military munition supplies, President Trump has replaced bombing threats with promises that the U.S. can squeeze Iran into submission economically.
You know, Iran is broke, totally broke, and they're not paying their soldiers.
Trump's new low-key approach is actually not new. Economic sanctions were already in play at the start of the war, coupled with U.S. military strikes to try to coerce Tehran to give up its nuclear program. In fact, U.S. sanctions date back to the 1979 revolution, denying Iran access to its own money abroad. That money, now estimated at $100 billion, is from past oil and gas sales to countries like China and Iraq. The U.S. had agreed to gradually release some of those funds to Iran under the now torn-up Memorandum of Understanding. Now both sides are again at a standoff, and the U.S. Department of Treasury has leveled even more sanctions against Iran. That's in addition to a U.S. naval blockade of Iranian ports, first imposed in April, briefly removed, and now back in force. The U.S. says the blockade is crippling Iran's remaining financial lifeline, delivering an estimated loss of $435 million a day, and bringing the country's oil exports from $4.5 billion in June down to near zero in July. In totality, economists here at the International Monetary Fund expect Iran's economy to shrink 5.4% this year. It's the sharpest contraction in 38 years. Yet even as their currency plummets and inflation soars, Iranians appear to be enduring the pain, with divided opinions expressed to journalists at Tehran's Grand Bazaar.
Maybe last year the economic situation was much better. This year, it is honestly terrible.
This is a very bad situation for shopkeepers, and it really is not good. But whatever happens, we will not accept humiliation.
Before the war, protests sparked by Iran's collapsing economy had triggered a state crackdown that killed thousands of civilians. Now, after U.S. and Israeli attacks on Iran that allowed for the ascent of a still more hardline leadership, Iranians are largely bearing the economic pain in silence, as Trump plays his gambit to wait them out. Heidi Jo Castro, Al Jazeera, Washington.
Joining us now to take a deeper look at Trump's new strategy for Iran is Marc Ginsberg. He is a former U.S. ambassador and White House Middle East policy advisor, as well as Kenneth Katzman, a former senior analyst on Iran at the U.S. Congressional Research Service. Ambassador Kenneth, thank you both for being back with us. Ambassador Ginsberg, I want to start with you. We have seen Trump for years, going back to the first Trump administration, exert so-called maximum pressure on Iran. What is different this time?
Well, this time, the Straits of Hormuz are completely in play, and Iran is completely cut off from the foreign currency reserves that it needs to sustain its economy. And number two, you have a situation where there's no end game for this administration. We don't know what the president is planning to do. The only thing we know is that he's engaged in what I'd call a campaign of epic endurance this is sort of the game of economic chicken. Which of the two parties is going to jump off the side of the road before a collision? I think in the end, the administration's going to cave before the Iranian government does.
Kenneth, we heard Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, say that the economic tools that they will use have never before been seen. So what does that mean about the maximum pressure campaign we saw earlier? Do they really have room to tighten the screws?
Alex, it's very difficult to know what he means by that. I mean, the only way to go beyond a naval blockade is to expand it to a land blockade also, which, again, it's going to cause pain, but additional pain to the Iranians. But the predicate is still the same. The idea that bringing economic pressure is going to cause the regime to make a different decision or to collapse or to cave in. And there's been no evidence through 4 decades that that's going to work. So I don't think any expert out there, myself included, thinks that that's going to succeed. And compounding the problem is Mr. Trump has demanded surrender or capitulation, which has inflamed nationalist sentiment. I think had he not used such verbiage, we might be further along in the campaign.
Yeah, and in addition to actions, we've heard the Iranians repeatedly say that the U.S. needs to stop with its insults. Ambassador Ginsberg, you just mentioned endurance. You've also spoken about patience and the need for enforcement for this to work. Patience is certainly not something that we associate with this president, with this administration. So where do you think this goes?
I think in the end, Donald Trump is going to do what he needs to do in order to save his soul regarding the upcoming midterm elections and the increasingly loss of popularity at home. Look, the Iranians are watching the polls here. In the end, the Iranian regime is going to survive till the last Iranian drops dead. They intend to hold on to power, and no matter how much punishment is being inflicted on the public. Here, the American public is disgusted with the state of affairs. But Donald Trump cannot concede that he can walk away from this, because in the end, the Iranians are basically playing him and playing the United States for what essentially it's been able to do for all these many years, which is the United States will walk away from all of its demands, and in the end, we'll wind up getting sanctions relief.
So what are you saying is more painful for the president, making concessions to the Iranians to essentially make this go away, or risking things on the political front and having Republicans lose in the midterms?
He was going to make these concessions before the latest outbreak of hostilities. He was prepared to offer sanctions relief. He was prepared to drop his demands that Iran's nuclear program has to be dismantled. He's going to drop his demands that Iran has no supervision over the Straits of Hormuz. He'll do anything to be able to turn what essentially is let's put it this way, to put lipstick on this pig.
Kenneth, do you agree that in this game of chicken, that's the kind of game that the IRGC welcomes?
Yeah, I'm not sure he's going to drop the demands. I think he's just going to not do anything. I mean, I think he feels he's on a course that he can coast to the midterms now. His energy secretary, Mr. Wright, is saying we're getting 8 or 9 million barrels a day out of the Strait. Industry sources say that's inflated. There's other oil going out through the west, through to the Red Sea. So I think Mr. Trump, and oil is West Texas Intermediate is $81 a barrel. So I think Mr. Trump feels he can coast without necessarily caving in at this point. The issue is if oil prices start to tick up again and there's a squeeze again, then he's going to face, I think, a crisis decision point.
Does it feel like the administration is looking at Iran as a single entity rather than the different parts? Yes, the economy is weakening. Yes, it can get much, much worse. But the IRGC, Ambassador Ginsberg, is relatively insulated, while the people, of course, will bear at least the initial brunt, much of the brunt of these economic sanctions.
Well, there's no doubt that based on what the regime is doing right now, which is in effect to marshal whatever resources it can to protect the integrity of the regime and provide what essentially is survival financing for the most essential elements that are required to maintain the economy from completely collapsing. They see this as a long game. Whether or not in the end the United States lifts its blockade of Iranian shipments, oil shipments through the straits will depend on whether or not the president believes that by doing so he can get Iran back to the negotiating table on the other issues that he had originally set when he launched this war. But the Iranians at this point in time feel that time is on their side. When I say Iran, the regime believes that time is on their side, and they believe the United States military options are evaporating.
You have made the point to me, Kenneth, that there is no such thing as the regime. But when you look at the different factions in Iran, whether it's the IRGC, the political class, and society, how will the U.S. gauge success of these new economic measures? Is it simply getting back to the table and having a good diplomatic outcome?
Yeah, I think getting back to the memorandum of understanding that your correspondent tore up in front of the building there, it's not torn up. It's in abeyance. It's not operational now, but Pakistan and other medias are actively working to get us back to the MOU. So it's a mixed bag. When you asked about the regime, what it is there are elected leaders who are very much in touch with the population. They talk to the population. They're elected by the population. President Pezeshkian, Mohammad Bakr Kalibaf, the parliament speaker, and they are saying the people are hurting. We can't just indefinitely practice resistance ideology. We have to have a compromise. The IRGC is basically saying, I don't care about public opinion. I don't care. We don't care about how much suffering there is. We need to not capitulate to Mr. Trump. So there is this battle within the regime as far as what direction to go.
When you look at the terms of that memorandum of understanding that has been literally, in at least one case, and figuratively torn up, one of the most angering things for the Iran hawks, for the Israelis, for example, was the Trump administration's willingness to unfreeze some of its frozen assets around the world to allow for increased oil sales. Ambassador Ginsberg, do you think those are things that the administration is still willing to entertain? Or are those off the table now because of the increased tension that we've seen in the past few weeks?
Gosh, it's really hard to answer that question because we don't know from one day to the next. Right now, that complete blockade is still in effect. I'm sure that mediators and some of our Arab allies are going to be saying to the administration, look, the current state of affairs is unacceptable. You've got to make a decision whether or not this MOU is going to be resurrected or whether or not you are going to essentially agree to Iran's demands that it has some form of hegemony over the straits and walk away. Because the Iranians are not leaving. All politics in the straits are local. The United States cannot maintain the military presence, much less the offensive capability it would need should a shooting war begin again and continue for the next several weeks, if not months.
This is quite the 180, Kenneth, from Trump at the beginning of the war telling Iranians that help is on its way to now further strangling their already very weak economy.
The whole issue is so disappointing for Reagan, the Reaganite faction of the party, which is a large part of the Republican Party, are Reaganites. This is a disaster to be having to make concessions to the Islamic regime. Many in the party believe if it takes 200, 300,000 ground troops, then that's the price. Then that has to be done. President after president has confronted the Islamic regime and failed and faltered, and now this president is faltering in front of the Islamic regime. He came in thinking this was going to be easy. He did not use enough force. He does not want to use enough force, and his results show. He has the results, the abhorrent results to show for it.
Let's talk about oil, because that, of course, is at the center of so much of this, and certainly these new economic measures. Due to a combination of the U.S. blockade of the Strait of Hormuz and increased enforcement, Iranian oil exports have fluctuated over the course of this war. As the U.S. and Israel launched attacks at the end of February, Iranian daily exports were nearly 2 million barrels per day. After the U.S. imposed its own blockade in April, that dropped to just 209,000 barrels per day. That's in May. When the U.S. temporarily lifted some sanctions the next month in June, Iranian exports roared back to some 2.3 million barrels a day. And those sanctions came back on as the tensions between the two sides increased. That was at the beginning of July. The U.S. Treasury Office of Foreign Asset Control, or OFAC, is responsible for making it difficult for Iran to sell its oil around the world. The U.S. Treasury Department puts companies and ships trading Iranian oil on a sanctions list and will try to block them from using any dollars to make sales. One particular focus is making sure that Iranian oil, which is already at sea on ships, stays at sea and off of the global market. It says that Iran uses a complex system of cryptocurrencies, of brokers, and of banks laundering money to violate sanctions. But critics argue that sanctions encourage the creation of a parallel global economy. Ambassador Ginsberg, this isn't just about U.S. gas prices here when it comes to American politics, but this is about global energy prices. What say, if any, do other countries have in this debate?
Well, every country, particularly Asian countries that depend on Iranian oil exports, are suffering. You could just see from the Philippines to Vietnam to Cambodia, energy prices are now having to be subsidized. The price of gasoline is actually outside the reach of many people in these countries. China doesn't seem to be so badly affected, but we all know that a barrel of oil is very fungible. That even if the United States is one of the largest producers of oil, what happens in the Straits of Hormuz is having a direct impact on the American consumer. Because even if we do not import Iranian oil, the market, the insurance costs, the shipping costs, everything generates a higher inflation degree that is having an impact at the pump. And this is one of those economic formulas that very few people really understand, because they say, why should what's going on in Iran affect the price of the pump at home? It's because of all the factors I just mentioned.
We have heard so much, of course, about the Strait of Hormuz, and this really is at the core of the disagreement and the lack of an ability to get to some kind of resolution. So I want to take a closer look at that. President Donald Trump insists that the U.S. has complete control over the Strait of Hormuz. Iranian officials say that is not the case. Our Matthew Torres takes a look at this complicated reality.
President Donald Trump has claimed not once but twice this week that the United States maintains total control over the Strait of Hormuz, even though diplomatic efforts with Iran have further declined.
I'm the last person to trust Iran. They've lied to me constantly. We have total control over the Hormuz Strait right now. They don't have control. We have total control. We own it.
On Truth Social, Trump also called the U.S. naval blockade a wall of steel. Iran rejects his claim, saying it's the one in control. Iran's Persian Gulf Strait Authority adds the Strait of Hormuz remains blocked until the U.S. fulfills demands, which includes compensation for war damages. But their competing claims come as the Strait of Hormuz has been transformed by the war. The international shipping route that traditionally runs through the middle has effectively closed because of mines. Iran says it's operating a route farther north, preventing vessels to navigate through without its permission. Meanwhile, the U.S., which still has its naval blockade, claims forces are escorting commercial ships through a different route, closer to Oman. Despite conflicting statements from both countries, shipping traffic remains low. Shipping analytics from Kepler found just 8 ships crossed on Wednesday. Before the war, as many as 140 vessels a day streamed through the water channel, carrying 1/5 of global oil and natural gas. Iran continues to negotiate with Oman over managing a new route, which it says does not include Washington. But even then, Tehran says the strait will remain blocked until the U.S. meets demands, including lifting sanctions and the blockade, unfreezing Iranian assets, and other demands. Matthew Torres, Al Jazeera, Washington.
And this isn't just about the Strait of Hormuz. We've reported a lot on the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, which is in the Red Sea, of course. Kenneth, the Houthis have been dialing things up. They've been making it more difficult for shipping there. How much more can the Iranians tell their proxies to get involved and make life really difficult for the U.S.?
Well, Alex, the Bab el-Mandeb is a little different because there is an alternative. You can go north up through the Suez Canal. So it's not as hermetic as the Strait of Hormuz. What I'm worried about also is we are now seeing a ground battle reemerging in Yemen. Remember, the Yemen war has been in a state of suspension since 2022. That battle now, which Saudi Arabia is backing the ousted Yemen government, is now starting to gin up again. There have been shelling, there's been attacks. And so Yemen is really becoming, I think, the next major theater that we're going to see conflict here.
But when you look at the spectrum of proxies, whether it's, Hezbollah has their own issues with Israel. They're relatively tied down. You've got the proxies in Iraq. And what else can Iran do to really, especially when it comes to targeting U.S. forces around the region?
The Houthis are probably the most active and best, quote unquote, best proxy for Iran now, because they don't have a government looking to disarm them. They don't have the constraints that are on Hezbollah, Hamas, the Iraqi militias, where Baghdad is looking to disarm them. So the Houthis are probably Iran's best sort of tentacle right now, not constrained. But as I said, the Saudis are now looking to counter that, possibly with ground action.
There has been a lot of reporting, and we have covered it extensively on this show, the diminishing stockpiles of some key U.S. weapons across different categories, some of the most sophisticated missiles as well as interceptors. Ambassador Ginsberg, when you see this shift in strategy from a combination of diplomacy and military operations with the economic as well to something that is really ratcheting things up on the economic side of things, how much does this feel like a last resort?
It's amazing. If you read the media, particularly the local media, Post, Times, about how many of our Patriots and our defense system missiles have been utilized and that our stockpiles have so completely diminished. It's like broadcasting to the Iranians, look, you have the upper hand here. Why? The dirty little secret in Washington is that this Pentagon has withheld the facts regarding how many Americans have really been injured and killed as a result of the Iranian ability to penetrate American air defenses, and how many missiles were used by the United States and its allies to counter the Iranian attacks, drone attacks, ballistic missile attacks. It seems like we claim that we've destroyed all of Iran's ballistic missile capability. I think that's a pipe dream. I don't think we have, and this is one of the concerns among our military leaders. If we resume the war again, the Iranians have proven that they can penetrate American air defenses.
This issue about the stockpiles is less about this war specifically and more about preparation and deterrence for future wars. Obviously, if the U.S. wanted to ramp things up now again against Iran, there's still quite a bit in their arsenal, but they don't want to burn through all of these very important different kinds of munitions. So to what extent, Kenneth, do you think this change in strategy is being read by the Iranians as military options are essentially off the table?
Alex, absolutely. They read the papers here. They go over it. They see all the interviews here. They know exactly what's going on here. And this is one reason why they're pressing on the strait, because they believe Mr. Trump is very much disinclined to go back to the military option, that he does want to conserve munitions. He wants a way out. So they are reading this and adjusting their strategy based on what they're reading. Absolutely.
There was a lot of criticism of this administration in the beginning of the war about a lack of a coherent vision for what victory was, whether it was regime change, whether it was knocking out the nuclear program, just taking out the more standard military capabilities for the region. Ambassador Ginsberg, at this point, do you think that the administration knows what its goal is?
No. I don't think, theoretically, it knew at the beginning what it wanted to achieve, theoretically. Practically, it never really had the strategy to achieve those objectives, whether it be ending Iran's nuclear program, dismantling its proxies, ridding this regime, overthrowing this regime by military force, all that's off the table now. I mean, it's regrettable. I've been involved in this issue ever since the Carter administration. I have seen one administration after the other fail to rise to the occasion when it comes to outwitting the Iranians. And this administration is probably going to get the gold medal for failing to do so.
Kenneth, how do you see it?
Alex, as I've said on this network and others, you show me a president that goes into the conflict with the Islamic Republic and rules out ground troops from day one, and I will show you a president that fails to achieve his objectives. I think I'll leave it there.
So I'll give you the last word, Kenneth, and we only have a couple moments left. But what is the offer that Washington can put on the table that Tehran would take to end this conflict?
The memorandum of understanding does not need to be rewritten. Mr. Trump would accept it, and the civilian leadership in Tehran will accept it. It's the hardliners that want to press the advantage based on what they're seeing, that Mr. Trump wants to get out. They want to press the advantage. If there were agreement to get back to the MOU, it is a basis to move forward and end this conflict, I believe.
But also, as you've noted, President Trump doesn't want to walk away with the impression that there are that he has made significant concessions. At the same time, you have a lot of Republicans running for Congress who would certainly like to see this war end yesterday. We have to end it there. Marc Ginsberg and Kenneth Katzman, thank you both very much. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
And that's all from myself and the team here in Washington. I want to hand it back to Heidi Jo Castro in Al Jazeera's global headquarters in Doha.
And that's it for now from the team at This Is America. You can catch our next show on Monday at 18:30 GMT or 2:30 p.m. Eastern here in the United States, or catch up on all our shows on Al Jazeera's YouTube channel. Thanks again for watching. That's it for now.